given all your experience in the region and at the State Department, I do want to ask you your take on some of these evacuations. We saw it appears, at least the embassy compound in Baghdad seems to have taken a strike this morning. There was smoke rising over that horizon. We've also got ordered departures in Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and a regional consulate in Turkey. What does it do for State Department operations when you have so much going on in a region? You need all those people who know those countries, and you also need them out of harm's way.
Well, good to be with you. Yeah, that's a tough situation because the Iranian regime has been targeting those diplomatic facilities because the Iranian regime doesn't really distinguish between military and civilian targets. They will target each indiscriminately as though they're equivalent. They don't respect that division. So our diplomats on the ground do have to be cognizant of that. It's not the first time that we've had to do this kind of ordered departure or authorized departure from some of these stations because it's the Iranians before who have threatened those facilities. So yeah, it cuts down on our diplomats' ability to do their work and engage with host nations in those places, but they have to be kept safe.
I want to get your read on this story that's developing that the administration is sending 2,500 additional Marines to the region in light of what's been happening over the last couple of weeks, and that will kind of add to the total of 50,000 American troops that are in the region right now. What does that portend to you? How do you read that? And then I'm curious, as we listen to the president, not ruling out the prospect of there being boots on the ground unequivocally, does it concern you? Does it raise an eyebrow that this could be where we're headed if we have that many new troops headed to the region?
Well, no, because in addition to being a State Department, former State Department person, in a former life, for 26 years, I was an Army officer, and I was actually a military planner and analyst at U.S. Central Command, the headquarters that is carrying out this campaign in lead for the United States. And so I was familiar back then in the olden days with an earlier version of this campaign plan. And the idea of having a Marine Expeditionary Unit to do the kind of operations that you would need to protect commercial vessels, commercial shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz, to be able to do operations in the Persian Gulf littoral to protect shipping, to be able to, it would give the president, would give the CENTCOM commander more options. And it actually signals, I think it's a good signal to the Iranian regime leaders in Tehran that the president and Admiral Cooper are keeping that option open. That's precisely the kind of very well-trained Marine force that you would need in order to be able to seize threatening vessels, in order to be able to disrupt mine-laying operations if the Iranian regime were to do that, or if they were want to try to seize some sort of Iranian island, maybe Karg Island or other facilities like that. It's signaling that the U.S. has that strategic option.
Colonel, since, as you're saying, this plan did exist during the first term, how closely is this administration's action following that plan, and what comes next?
Well, I don't have any inside information on that. Being retired, I'm out of the loop, so I can only.
But you were in the loop the first time around, so far
well,
is it
true.
Playing out according to plan?
Well, it's so much more advanced. I mean, as someone who was formerly familiar with an earlier version of that plan, the military technology advances just in the 15 years or so since I was involved in that sort of thing are just astonishing, and the military imbalance between the U.S. and Israel on one side and the Iranian regime on the other is far wider than CENTCOM would have enjoyed back then under General Abizaid, General Petraeus, and so on. It's if you had told me in 2009 that 2 weeks into this campaign plan, the Iranian leadership would be decimated, their ballistic missiles would be down by over 90%, their drones down by over 90%, they would have no operable Air Force, Navy, missile defense, and air defense, I'd have told you were smoking something. But it's just astonishing the military progress that's being made, at an operational level.
You talk about the military progress made. The president sat down with Brian Kilmeade on his radio show a little earlier this week and talked about what an endgame might look like. Let's take a listen to what he had to say to Brian Kilmeade.
We had the greatest economy in history. We still do. Oh, this will bounce right back. When it's over, and I don't think it's going to be long, when it's over, this is going to bounce right back so fast.
When are you going to know when it's over?
When I feel it.
Okay.
I feel it in my bones.
Colonel, I want to get your reaction to that last line, when he feels it in his bones. But you very clearly laid out that list of all of the defensive targets that have been hit by the U.S. and taken offline, the Supreme Leader killed, as you mentioned. Your sense from your experience in the first term and from what you've observed here over the last few weeks of what the end game is likely to be here and what the timeline this administration is working with?
Well, there's a military end game. There's a military end state that's very clear. There's a political end state that's something different. On the military side, the objectives that they laid out, the president, Secretary Rubio, at the beginning of eliminating the nuclear program, ballistic missile and drone program, the ability for the Iranian regime to use terrorist proxies outside their borders. Those are all well on their way to being accomplished. And then the further phase of essentially eliminating the Iranian regime's production capacity to be able to regenerate those kind of things if there is a cessation of hostilities with an Iranian regime still there in place. Now, the political end state is still unclear. And it seems to me, as I was a staffer for President Trump, we all know the president is someone who likes to keep his strategic options open. He enjoys strategic ambiguity because it gives him leverage in negotiating outcomes. And I think he's still doing that here. Whether he's willing to tolerate an end of campaign with a rump Iranian regime still in place, but greatly weakened, with it lacking the capacity to go on into the future, is something he's keeping. He's keeping that option open. And that creates confusion on the Iranian regime side. I think that actually hinders their ability to respond, which is what you want.
Colonel, quickly before we let you go, the Secretary of Defense admitted in his press conference this week, saying that I can't say that we anticipated necessarily that's how Iran would react. He was being asked about Iran striking regional allies, which in his defense, I think did take quite a lot of people, even regional experts, by surprise. Should the U.S. have anticipated that? And how should the U.S. respond to an Iran that is willing to strike friends and neighbors in the region?
Well, I think when you're planning, when you're going through the permutations and possible scenarios, if you're planning out your war gaming, a campaign plan like this, I think absolutely the planners would have had a scenario where they said the Iranian regime just lash out at the region around it. You would consider that. You would consider that a worst case scenario, but you'd also consider it, I think, low probability, because it's something that's so counterproductive to Iranian interests. It's harmed them so much. See, the entire rest of the Arab world and Turkey, were drawn into a conflict that they had intended to stay on the sidelines of.